When I was a teacher, there were times when I had to make choices as to what technology my students were going to use on a project. I had to do a lot of research and make sure that the technology tool that they were using was going to get the job done. In fact, there are people out there who do this for their job and work with different companies and businesses and different types of people to let them know about different types of technology they should be using to make sure that the project can get accomplished. Who would do this for their job? Find out what STEM career I am talking about in this episode of the STEM Career Quest. Have you ever found yourself asking this question? What do I want to be when I grow up? Maybe you already have an answer to that. Maybe you don't. Both are okay. Welcome to the STEM Career Quest podcast, a show made for kids like you to help you build your dreams or even find new ones in science, technology, engineering, and math. Each week, hear captivating stories and interviews to explore the exciting world of STEM. Oh, and grown-ups and teachers, you can listen too. We'll talk to experts in STEM who are passionate about what they do in the real world and how they make a positive impact in their careers. Created and hosted by K-5 STEM coach Naomi Meredith, this show will spark your imagination and passions. Join us each week on our quest to explore the possibilities of careers in STEM, one episode at a time. The STEM career that we are going to be hearing more about today is what it is like being a science and technology liaison for the military. Science and technology liaisons problem solve and research to find the best tools that will work for a project. They will then talk about this information with the companies or businesses that they're helping out with their research. To tell us more about it, we are going to be meeting our special guest, Jessica Scott. Jessica is a mechanical and materials engineer and uses her background and experience to help her collaborate on projects that actually help out a branch of the military, the Navy. Her job can be really exciting, especially when she gets to the experimentation parts and all of the cool tools that she gets to explore. Jessica also creates materials for kids just like you to help you get excited about engineering and the possibilities of STEM. Her most recent project is something that you're definitely going to love, the Playful Engineering Coloring Book. So excited for you to meet Jessica and hear more about her and her awesome STEM career. Now, get ready for today's episode quest, my Questies. How have you been doing on these questions? You might have gotten better at listening just by having these amazing questions to find the answers to. I will be giving you these quest questions, and at the end, I will reveal the answer. Question number 1 is, which branch of the military does Jessica and her team support? Question number 2 is, what is a saying that Jessica and her team often say? And question number 3, what is a funny prank that Jessica and her coworkers did one time? Be a careful listener. Now let's embark on today's episode quest. Well, thank you, Jessica, so much for being here. We're so excited to learn all about your job as being a science and technology liaison. If you wouldn't mind telling us, tell us more about your STEM career and how would you describe what you do?
All right. Thank you so much for having me, Naomi. I really appreciate it. So, I am an engineer, and my title, Science and Technology Liaison, means that I am looking at technology before it has been determined. So, if we have problems that we need to solve, it's a fun space to be in because we're brainstorming and we're coming up with ideas and we're taking a look at different pieces of technology that might be out there that we could put together and come to a solution, or maybe it's research, or maybe it's something another organization has created. Since I work for the Navy, we're at a lab where we do some things internally, and there are also other groups that do things outside of our group. So the liaison, me, likes to go between groups and make those connections and help get the technology to a place that makes sense to figure out what our next steps would be.
That sounds like a lot of fun, and it seems like you probably have to talk to a lot of people in your job. Is that right?
It's right. And I love talking to people.
Well, and we're so glad that you're here because we're all about talking here on this podcast. So what would you say? It sounds really cool. I can tell that you're really excited about it. You're smiling. What would you say is the coolest part about your job? Or if you even have a lot of cool parts too?
There's a lot of cool stuff about my job. I get to work with the military, working with the Navy. So I really enjoy that. And one of my favorite parts about my job is that there's a lot of experimentation. So, experimentation, you may be familiar with this term, but the way that we think of experimentation is it's a chance for us to take different ideas of capabilities or capabilities that aren't fully ready yet to be produced and put them out in the field, is what we like to say. And that means that we might have that technology with military people that will use it, or maybe other people that are experts in similar areas where they can look at it and give feedback, different things like that. So, experimentation is my favorite thing. It's exciting. It's an event that you get to get up and go to, and you're watching things happen. And sure, some of the technology isn't, a flash and a bang. You don't have necessarily an explosion, but some of it does. So I like to have that wide range of experiences and go to as many experimentation events as I can.
With the inventions and the technology that you guys work with, does everything work the first time? Or is that what that experimentation helps with?
Definitely not. So, um, experimentation helps us to figure out ways to improve, and it might be little bits at a time. Um, Occasionally, I would say that you might have something that you've been able to prove in a lab environment. Maybe you have some software on a computer that you're using to help you understand whether it's going to work or not, or whether you can count on it working or not. But whenever you take things out into an experimentation event, all bets are off. Different things can happen that you didn't foresee or guess or assume whenever you're setting up your experiment on the lab side.
So, all you kids out there, when you're working on a project, it sounds like that it's okay if it doesn't work the first time. You have to keep going and have a growth mindset because that is part of her job. And look how excited Jessica is about that part. She actually loves that experimentation. So, don't get frustrated, keep going.
We actually have a saying with one of the groups that I work with. It's called fail fast. So Um, not to say that it's necessarily good to fail, but it almost is good to fail because then you know the way that you won't make your technology or capability. You'll know that that's a path that you can say, okay, that one didn't work. Let's try the next idea.
Awesome. Well, speaking of the projects in your experimentation, tell us about a neat project you work on, something shocking that might have happened to you, or a funny story. Tell us something that has happened in your career.
So, I have gotten to work on so many different cool projects. And one of the things that I love the most is that I get a very wide range of technologies that I get exposure to. I've worked on cube satellites, I've worked with helicopters and coatings, I've worked on different technologies which we call ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. So it's just basically looking and seeing what's out there and understanding what it looks like. But I have to say that one of the funny things that happens in all of this, heavy technical work that I do side by side with the people that I work with. and have wonderful working relationships with is we like to prank each other. We do. And this is a tradition that actually started when I first started working for the defense industry or the military as an Air Force employee. Um, and one of my favorite pranks is where we would take little bits of paper and put them in a person's mouse. So there's a little cavity underneath the mouse where the sensor has to be able to see for the mouse to know where to move. And we would shove paper in the mouse. And it was just the funniest thing because we would take turns hiding around a corner and waiting to see the person get really frustrated with their mouse not working. So I have to say, as far as funny goes, we do like to prank each other a little bit. We're mischievous.
Don't try this at home, kids. Though it makes it fun, like being at work, like knowing you guys get along and it's just silly things
Mhm.
to
Absolutely.
do all that. 3 things about cube satellites you may or may not already know. Cube satellites are also known as CubeSats. And just as their name sounds, they are a satellite that is shaped like a cube or a box. These satellites are really tiny and can fit in the palm of your hand. What's also cool about these satellites is they can be stacked up on top of one another to do really cool things in space. CubeSats are small but mighty. When they are orbiting the Earth, they can accomplish a lot of different projects, like tracking the weather, taking pictures, and so much more. Because of their size, CubeSats are also helpful because they are tiny. Many of them can fit into a spacecraft at one time. Once they are in space and go off on their mission orbiting the Earth, they are extremely helpful and can actually reduce the amount of space junk that is orbiting our Earth. Did you know these 3 things about cube satellites? Pretty cool, right? Loving the STEM Career Quest podcast and want more? Join the STEM Career Quest Club. Perfect for teachers, homeschool parents, or families looking to add more educational opportunities during school breaks. Inside, you get access to a private community of other STEM Career Quest listeners, comprehension guides for each episode, teaching slides for each episode where it is broken up into chunks so you can listen in smaller segments, related STEM activities you can complete with simple materials, 1 monthly virtual STEM field trip, and more. Join the club at stemcareerquestpodcast.com/club. Well, this sounds like an awesome job, and you weren't born into this job. So
Right.
tell us, what experiences in your life led you to this career?
Well, I have an interesting path, I think, to engineering. I wasn't necessarily amazing at math as a kid. I wasn't envisioning this future for myself when I was very young. But as I got older, and I started to understand different jobs that were out there. And I remember hearing my parents talk about family members that had a little bit of experience in engineering. My grandfather was in the Army Corps of Engineers. Unfortunately, I didn't get to meet him. And my uncle was a nuclear engineer. Unfortunately, I also didn't get to meet him. So it kind of piqued my interest. I'm like, engineering, what's that? And my parents really didn't know much about it, to be honest with you. So I started exploring it on my own. And I realized that whenever you look at an engineering career, it can seem like a lot of math or other things that might not at first excite you. But once you start to understand where you can go with an engineering career, those are just little steps on the way. And as long as I was taking everything along the way as a step, I made it through just fine. And I think that's a really great way to approach wanting to take your life into an engineering career because it can open a lot of doors.
How did you with your pathway to where you're at, how did you get connected into the Navy? Because there's engineers in all types of roles. So how did that all happen?
So whenever I got closer to graduating with my undergrad, so when I first went to college and got my mechanical engineering degree, I was curious about the defense industry. I had an internship with the HVAC industry, so that's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. And a lot of mechanical engineers will do, the insides of the building. There's a lot going on in there, all right? In order to make sure your building doesn't catch on fire or is temperature controlled, um, that's a lot of work, and engineers are involved in that, especially local to the geographical area that I'm in. So I started looking into the defense industry because I had heard a conversation with somebody, and then I thought about that. My grandfather being in the Army Corps of Engineers, and I just sort of had an epiphany, and I knew it would be a good fit for me because I like a little bit of excitement. I love things that go boom, even though I've only gotten to see a couple times that, but it was so worth it. I love aircraft. Anything that flies is amazing. I even like coatings, which is just a fancy word for paint. Um, Not everybody knows this, but you can adjust the reflectivity or how much paint reflects by different processes in manufacturing, where tiny little fibers of glass or something else reflective, shiny, are at different angles. So it's just a world of interesting opportunity in the defense industry.
That's really amazing to hear because we might not always think that our military needs those types of roles, but it's absolutely necessary
Mhm.
to have your expertise to help everything work the way that it should.
That's right.
For other kids who are like, wow, this sounds like a really cool job. I want to do what Jess does. What advice do you have for kids who want to do something similar to this career?
I always say this to my own children and any kid that's listening. I think it's really important to think about what you want your day to be like whenever you're a grown up, whenever you're working. If there's something that interests you or excites you, look look into how do I do that job and work backwards from there. Because even if your path or the way that you go about your career isn't exactly the same, you'll get a really good idea of what is needed to eventually have that job that you imagine yourself doing, or that exposure or time with whatever you're interested in. And you spend a lot of time at your job. So it's important that you really enjoy what you're doing, or at least it excites you most of the time.
Well, that's great advice. So kids who might want to see all the experimentation, or maybe some kids don't, and that's okay too. But great advice saying, how do I want my day to be? That's excellent advice. And I think a lot of grown-ups out there need to hear that too as well. Well, thank you so much for sharing all about your amazing role. I can tell that you really love it and have a great time with your fun coworkers and all the cool things you get to play with all day. But we appreciate your expertise and hearing all about it.
Thank you so much.
Hope you've been listening carefully to today's episode. Now we are going to reveal the answers to our episode quest. Question number 1 was, which branch of the military does Jessica and her team support? The Navy. Now, I kind of gave away the answer when I was introducing Jessica, so you might have been an extra careful listener and already knew the answer before Jessica even talked about it. So, way to go, my questie. Question number 2 is, what is a saying that Jessica and her team often say? Fail fast. I love that saying, and that is definitely something that I want to start using in my own life. What about you? And question number 3 is, What is a funny prank that Jessica and her coworkers did one time? I don't suggest doing this to anybody in your life. This is what some grown-ups did. But they played a prank on one of their coworkers by putting in tiny little bits of paper inside of their computer mouse, which caused the mouse to not work very well and make the other person really frustrated. So maybe one day when you have a STEM job, you can do this, but don't do this at home. Pretty funny though. How did you do with the questions? If you need help following along and want more bonus content when it comes to the episodes and listening to all of the questions, I invite you to join the STEM Career Quest Club, where you get all of the access to those materials and more. Loving the STEM Career Quest podcast? Want to be featured on the show? Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and tell us what you love about it. Maybe you'll be featured on our next episode. What is something new that you learned today about being a science and technology liaison? Is this the type of career that you might want to try someday? Even if it isn't, it is still great to keep learning about these amazing STEM careers to help you explore the different opportunities and how our world works. Thank you so much for being here, and let's continue your journey in the STEM Career Quest in the next episode. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the STEM Career Quest podcast. Grab your free episode badge, connect with today's guest, follow us on social media, join the club, and more. Find it all on our website at stemcareerquestpodcast.com.